Hello, buddy. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about the patch notes for patch 8.16. So, I'm not going to do a Google Doc for this one. We're just going to go over the patch notes themselves, and this one's going to be just a little bit different as well because my schedule is different. Be sure to check out on the channel. I just released earlier on Monday a video that describes what my new stream schedule is going to be, and this is because I have a new teaching appointment, and I have to drive 5 hours and commute to go teach Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'm going to come back on Thursday and start streaming again. So there's not going to be any streaming on Tuesday or Wednesday because I'm going to be out of town, and I'm not going to be in a place where I'll have a streaming setup. As a corollary to that, I can't currently produce other videos as well on the stream. I was looking to see if I could get OBS, which is what I currently use, this open broadcast software, in order to record on my iPad, which is the current sort of mobile device that I have, computing device that I can use, but I couldn't find any way to do that. So I'm going to keep working on that, keep seeing what I can come up with. I really don't want to have to buy, another $500,000 laptop or something in order to record when I'm on the road. So what I'm going to try to do then is to record things ahead of time and then release them over time. So you're going to be seeing this likely on Tuesday, and I'm just going to time release content, while I'm gone so that you'll have fresh stuff every single day. Because usually I record something and release it on the same day. But now that I'm not going to be in town for a couple of days a week, I'm going to try to record it otherwise. So, what does all that have to do with this video? This is going to be based on the very last iteration of the PvE patch notes. So this is not going to be the patch notes themselves because they don't release those until Tuesday afternoon, and I'm not going to be here Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And this week we have a workshop seminar thing that I have to go to on Friday, so I'm not going to be back until Friday night. So my options here are, well, I could just wait until I get back to do the patch notes and the support tier list. Or I could go ahead and do the patch notes based on the PvE and just wait until Monday, when I know that it's going to be like 99% accurate probably. And then if anything's different on the actual patch notes, I can get on my phone and just leave a comment on the video and just say, hey, this has changed or that has changed. And then that way you can still be up to date. So if there are some dramatic changes on the patch notes, just come back, look at the comments, and I'll leave my thoughts written in the comments if there's something that dramatically changes. But typically not a lot changes. This is, by the way, what most content creators do. If you look at Philol or Red Mercy or some of the other big name people out there, when they talk about new on patch 8.16 or whatever, they're using the PvE because they don't have the patch notes either. And they release videos like that usually 3 or 4 days before the patch notes come out. So it's a fairly common practice. I usually like to wait until the official notes to make sure I'm 100% accurate. But because of the logistics right now, I'm just going to go ahead and just make sure that I get this out here because I want you to get the content soon, on Tuesday before... so that you don't have to wait until Friday, so that you'll have all the stuff that you need to know going into the patch. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. So once again, there might be some things that are a little different. I'll leave comments about that. Be sure to check them out when the actual patch notes come out, but this should be 99% accurate. All right, so let's go ahead and go through. All right, Aatrox getting a nerf. I think Aatrox is relatively fine right now. Like, his win rate is not too far over the line. I'll have times. I think I can get timestamps in the description. We'll have to see. I haven't used the delay feature that much, like I said, but I'll see if I can get some timestamps in the description still for you. Or I can definitely put them like as a comment if I can't get them in the description when I time release it. But I don't think that he's that far out of line. I mean, he's 51% right now. He is pretty good. I feel like he's a pretty good bruiser, but maybe in professional play he is over the line. Let me see here. Okay, well, there was a website, and I don't remember where it was, for, like, this week. I don't think it's this. That's pro builds. No. I don't remember what the keywords are that I typed in. But I don't think he's getting... I don't think he's that overpowered, but whatever. They're giving him a pretty hard nerf on this patch. So they're nerfing his healing on the wave. They're nerfing his charges from 2 to 1 right when he levels up. So I guess that means he doesn't have the power spike. This is going to give him a lot less sustain in lane. But it shouldn't really affect that much for like late game team fighting, I don't think. Now this is just his Umbral dash. But, I mean, it matters. You know, anytime you drop somebody from 33% to 15%. Now, this is on basically lane minions or jungle camp. So, it's on non-champions. That just gives him a lot less sustain in lane. You're going to be able to poke him out earlier on in the game, potentially. And so, that's okay. That's going to hurt his, like, lane dominance. But this one's pretty big, where it's 20 extra seconds on his cooldown. This is probably not going to matter as much in pro play because people just wait and not fight until the ultimate's up. But in solo queue, that extra 20 seconds is a really big deal. As we all know, your team's just going to run around and get into random fights anyways. So that's kind of a big deal. So overall, where does that put him? I mean, I think he's still like playable. He's still all right. But... you know, I just think that he's definitely going to be worse than he currently is. So there aren't really other bruisers. I mean, I guess like Camille is still pretty good. So maybe this like creates a spot for Camille to get a little bit better. You know, other sustained tanky type of things like Mundo probably get a little better off of this. Other fighters like Kled get a little better. So like other bruiser, like damage, relatively tanky or difficult to kill champs top lane are going to get a bit better. Irelia probably gets a little bit better off of this. Garen gets better. So yeah, I think he's definitely going to fall down a little bit. If I had to predict a percentage, I'd say he'll fall probably 1.5%. So not like an astronomical fall, but it'll definitely bring him down. Okay, Amumu. I don't think this is going to matter. The Pascal damage reduction gains 3% from a bonus armor and magic resist. So I think he gets up to 10. As he levels up. And as I understand, now this website has been pretty squirrely lately. Okay, we are getting the stats here though, which is good. Yeah, he gets up to 10. Now, let's say that he has, and that it's bonus armor and magic resist. So it's not total armor. So it's not his base armor. It's not his base magic resist. It's only bonus. So even if he has 100, 100, he would only get 6% extra. So take it to, or 16 extra flat. And I believe the flat reduction applies after armor. If it works like bone plating, which applied after armor reduction, yes. So that can be pretty good against champions that don't do that much base armor. So for example, so you have 100 armor, 100 magic resist. That's going to give you 6 extra, so you're going to have 16 physical damage reduction. If somebody hits you with an auto attack that would deal 100 damage, you have 100 armor, it's going to reduce it by 50%, it's going to take it down to 50 damage, and then it's going to be reduced further by an additional 16, which is going to take it down to 34. So that's actually quite a lot. I mean, in that scenario, that's a 32% damage reduction, right? Because it's taking it down to 15, and then you're getting 16 reduced off of that 50, and I believe that's 32%. So, yeah, I mean that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So against a lot of auto attacking champions, that can be nice. That also bypasses armor penetration because it's not armor; it's physical damage reduction. Kind of like Warwick or Irelia, except those are percentage based rather than flat based. So I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but I think that it's perhaps a little bit more than people might originally suspect. But is this enough to propel him, back into the meta? I don't think so. I mean, Amumu's problem is he's just really inconsistent. Like, you have to actually hit your Qs, and whenever it's just a lot harder to hit that. The hitbox is a lot smaller, and it doesn't gap close. So, like with Sejuani, if you miss your charge, well, you're still in their face, and you can still, you know, hit them with your W and slow them, and, you know, you just have a lot more, like, reliable CC. Whereas with Amumu, if you miss that bandage toss, you really can't do anything. Like, the rest of your kit just doesn't work unless you flash an ult on them. So, it's okay. Now, it does receive 10% bonus true damage from all incoming magic damage calculated before resist reduction. So, it's okay. I mean, he's okay. Look, he's okay, but he needs more help. He just, his jungle clear is just too weak early on. He's super reliant on hitting the Q for the rest of his kit to even function. It's a very slender hitbox. It does have pretty nice range at 1100, but the hitbox is pretty small. It's very telegraphed what he wants to do. He doesn't have mobility. Like, he can't really jump over walls very easily unless he, like, bandage tosses onto, like, jungle camps or something. Like, there's just a lot of restrictions on him. His age, definitely, you can tell. And he has a super long cooldown, so he's very ultimate reliant, and it's a 150-second cooldown on something that just really doesn't do very much base damage. And a lot of his kit just does not do a lot of base damage. Like, he does have some okay base ratios. Like, this is pretty good base damage. But I just don't think there's ever a reason to play Amumu when champions like something like Sejuani exist. Like, I just feel like Sejuani is just a lot more consistent and does the same kind of stuff. Initiate fight and just does, like, pretty good sustained damage over time in fights. So, I just feel like he's just not modernized enough to really matter right now. But he's okay. I mean, can you win with him? Sure. He's probably got like a 50% win rate or so. Yeah, he's a 50.6% win rate, but I feel like there are just going to be a lot better choices out there. Okay, Fizz, super strong on this patch right now. They're nerfing his W down, the on hit, and the bonus magic from 60 to 50. So, I think that's good. I think he'll still be a pretty good assassin. I think he's a little over the top right now. He's not too bad, but I think a lot of people just really slept on him this patch and just did not play him as much as he deserved to be played. Yeah, he's getting up to about a 55% win rate. So people are figuring it out now. I called this on the last patch when they did that, and he still had a really low play rate and ban rate. So people just were not smart about this for the last 2 weeks because they didn't watch my video. I mean, I wasn't the only person that knew Fizz was going to be strong. There were a lot of other analysts predicting he was going to be really good. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty far over the lines. 55% and then a 36% ban rate. His numbers are just too high. So, I like that they're bringing him into line. I think he'll still be strong. I mean, they're only knocking 10% off of his R after they gave it 30%. And so they're dialing back a little bit of the buffs. I still think he'll be really good, though. I don't think he really needed buffs in the first place after some of his more recent changes, but either way, that's fine. Okay, Hecarim, his total AD ratio on his Q, that's nice. That will help his jungle clear out a good chunk, because that's not bonus, that's total, I believe. He's kind of got that old school, because he's from, like, Season 3, I think. Old school scaling. Like, they've taken away a lot of flat AD scaling in the game, and they've changed most of it to bonus. Oh, it is actually bonus AD on his Q. Okay, so that's a misprint here. So it says it's only a 60 to 70% AD ratio, but it's bonus AD ratio. Okay, well that changes the calculus around a little bit. Okay, so that's not going to matter. That's not going to matter because he's not going to build AD. You know, you have to go like Trinity, Cinder Hulk, and then usually Spirit Visage or some other tank type of item. So this, you know, when I was talking about the PBE last week, and, you know, I thought maybe this would change a little bit. They are increasing his damage to 215, so they are increasing the base damage. That will help his clear a little bit, but I was thinking that ratio was on his total AD. But it's on the bonus, so... And that means that, like, his base attack damage, like his 60 attack damage, doesn't factor into this. So, I don't think it's going to matter that much. I mean, early on, it's not anything. Like level 1, it's 55, and then this is what usually you max first is your Q. And so, you know, by the time you're level 5, you get 10 more damage. It's just not enough. Like, Hecarim's problem is he's very ult reliant to function a lot of the time. Like, he can be really fast and get some good ganks, but he's suffered a lot from the introduction of blast plants. I think, because like his thing used to be he could run really quickly, so if he got behind you and got a flank, then he could, you know, get around and have nicer ganks. So he had that advantage over a lot of the other junglers at the time when he was released. I think it was Season 3, in that he was just really fast, and even if you saw him on wards, he was still going to get there and make a move on you, kind of like Rammus was. But now with the blast plants, and just a lot of the extra mobility of like new rage junglers, then they can kind of do what he does. Like they can get around and flank you and get on top of you effectively. So I still feel like he's just going to get out-competed by other junglers. He just requires a lot of items. He really needs Cinder Hulk and Trinity Force before he starts becoming a real force. Now, if you snowball, if you get several kills on him, he can be really strong later on in the game. He is very difficult to deal with once he has his ult, and he just runs and like dives onto the back line and can one-shot people. So he can be very dangerous. They are nerfing Electrocute, which is good for him, and he is very good with Predator, and he would like... trying to think of what else he would get. I mean, Sudden Impact would be pretty good on him, but that's getting nerfed. But he definitely likes Predator, and then I think like Ingenious Hunter with Predator would be pretty good. Although he doesn't get like items with Ingenious Hunter that much. You know, he's gonna get Cinder Hulk Trinity, and those have no item actives on it. So Ingenious Hunter would really only affect Predator. I mean, you could go. I mean, like, basically the bottom line is, like, he does have options. This does help him out a little bit, but he's still going to suffer just by the fact that, I guess some people are going to electrocute on him. He's just too slow. Like, he's a fast champion, but he just comes online too slowly. He just needs more time than you're usually going to get in a lot of games. And his ratios just aren't that high to begin with. Like, yeah, this is going to get bumped up to 70, but it's not going to matter. He doesn't have an AD ratio on this. He doesn't have an AD ratio on his ult. It's just AP, which is terrible on him. This only has a 50% AP ratio, so his scaling is just pretty bad. He has to snowball super hard off his Trinity power spike, and I think it's just too risky. So I don't think we'll be seeing a lot of Hecarim near the top of the rankings. Okay, Leona got changed several times on the PBE this patch. I think this is what they're finally going to go with, which is a buff to her W. So, you know, it goes down eventually to 10 seconds. So that'll help her late game out a little bit. I think Leona could use a little bit of help. She's not in a terrible spot right now, but she's also not in an amazing spot. She's probably like 51%. Yeah, she's 51.6. So she's in an okay spot. I don't think she needs that much more help. But I think what they're... If I'm really like giving them the most generous interpretation on this patch, I think they're trying to create another way to counter enchanters, because enchanters are going to get stronger if they nerf burst champions. Like, they're nerfing Electrocute and Sudden Impact, and one of the biggest beneficiaries of that are going to be champions like Janna. Because if you don't burst and blow up and end fights quickly, then enchanters are the best supports most of the time, because the longer the fight goes on, the more heals and shields they can throw down, and healing and shielding is still the highest scaling stat in the game because of the way that it multiplies with resistances. I've talked about this in a lot of videos in the past. Be sure to check that out, my AP itemization video. I explain it. I have a whole video on scaling as well, if you want to check that out. But basically, like, a heal from someone like or a shield from someone like a Nami or a Janna. It has a base number. It usually scales off of AP. Then it gets multiplied again based off of the plus healing and shielding stat. And then it also effectively gets multiplied by magic resistant armor. So for example, if you throw a 200 shield on somebody, let's say that it has a 0.5 AP ratio, you have 100 AP. Well, now it becomes a 250 shield. Then let's say you have plus 20% healing and shielding. Well, then it's going to turn into a 300 shield. And if you're shielding somebody that has 100 armor and someone else is trying to do physical damage to that person, then it effectively becomes a 600 shield. So that's why, plus healing and shielding, it just feels like it's impossible to kill champions if they have a Soraka late game, or a Sona, or a Janna, or whatever, because that stat just scales insanely well with the itemization and just how the stats work in League of Legends. And so, what that means is that since they're nerfing the quick burst champions by nerfing Electrocute, enchanters are going to get really strong. They don't want it to be a Janna Ardent Censer meta because everyone cried about that last year again. I wouldn't mind. I'm really good on Janna. She's my most played champion. But I'm just saying that they're trying to preempt that, I believe, by making Leona stronger because she is one of the supports that can stick and get on the enchanters and potentially kill them early on. So they're trying to give her a bit more power with W. Is it actually going to work? We'll see. Janna's pretty good against Leona. So, anyways, I think that's the logic behind the Leona nerf. So now, champions that can get onto enchanters would be like Rakan, Alistar, Pyke, Blitz. Now Leona can work as well. So, that's pretty good. You know, Leona inherently is a very dangerous champion. You know, if you're really far ahead, she feels great. If you fall behind, she feels horrible. So, I think that's a fine buff. Alright. Nautilus. So, I'm pretty sure this is a nerf. He's going to have his shield up more, but they're nerfing the health on it. It's changing from 65 to 85 to 60 to 100. So, it's getting 15 more at max. But they're taking down the HP scaling by 4%. And the duration is lower. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a nerf. Like, late game, it's more valuable to have 4% max HP than to have 15 base. Because even if you only have 1,000 HP, which is not going to happen as Nautilus, that's not bonus HP, that's max. So, if you have 1,000 HP, you're still going to be losing 40 HP on your or 40 shield off of that, and you're only gaining 15 in compensation. So, yeah, I think that's pretty terrible. I don't know why. Like, it just seems so random. Like, why give a neutral / probably a nerf change to Nautilus when he already is, like, a really rare pick? I don't know. Like, Nautilus needs the mana cost increased on his E, or the damage, or just something with his E to make it more viable. Because that's his thing. I think that's one of his things as a tank that separates him from other tanks, is he can just spam his E, and it has pretty good wave clear and pretty good, like, base damage, especially against, like, squishy. So he doesn't have any percentage damage in his kit, I don't believe. Like other champions like Ornn or Mundo with the cleaver, so he just relies on his flat damage. So, I don't know. Like, he has good CC with his hook, his ult, obviously his auto attacks, but I don't know. He needs a little bit of help, and this is definitely not it. Okay, so Orianna getting MR nerfed below 30. I think she's the only champ in the game that has MR below 30 now. It might be Thresh as well, but almost everybody has a baseline 30 MR, so that's an interesting to just kind of single her out. She is seeing some pro play, but it seems kind of odd if they go through with that. Quinn gets a slap on the wrist. That's laughable. She's still really overpowered, especially in top lane, but she's even pretty decent in bot lane or mid. Now, Rakan, this is a pretty significant nerf to Rakan. Like, he's losing 30 HP on his base, and his armor, he's going from 36 to 33. But if you switch over and start using Unsealed Spellbook Rakan, and I think that's what a lot of people are going to start doing. I think I'm a little ahead of the curve on that. I've been doing that the last few streams. It feels really, really good. And the reason for that is, I mean, Guardian's not that great to begin with on him. It's okay. Like, Revitalize is not amazing as a final rune for him, just because you almost always go Zeke's to open. And so you don't get any benefit from Revitalize with that. You max your W before your shield most of the time, so your shield's your secondary, so once again, Revitalize is not going to give you a lot there. Now, after that, you can get a Redemption or a Locket, and Revitalize does help out with that if you choose to go that route. But I just feel like Revitalize is a little underwhelming, especially in the early game. Now, Bone Plating and Chrysalis are good, but I just feel like Guardian and Revitalize, Guardian as well, like, you're not going to be stacking a bunch of health, you know, you're going to be getting Zeke's, Locket, and Redemption a lot of times, and Like, that stuff just doesn't have a lot of health on it. So you're not going to get a lot of extra scaling off of Guardian either. And that just gets triggered off of so many random things in lane all the time. Like, someone auto-attacks you and your Guardian procs. Like, it's okay later in the game. But compare that with Spellbook. Now, I'm going to have a whole video about Spellbook pretty soon. Maybe I can do something like that today. I just don't know if I have time. I have to go to sleep at some point. But I think that it's really underutilized. Some pro players are starting to use it now on like Braum and Tahm. But the thing about it, let me pull it up here, that I didn't realize until I played with it is that the cooldown on the rune starts when you do your swap, not when you use the rune. So if we go here and look at Spellbook, so it says, you know, it's every 240 seconds. So, like, what can happen is, let's say you get into a fight, use your Ignite bot lane or whatever, you have an empty slot, you swap that over to Exhaust or something, and then you don't use that Exhaust for another 2 minutes. Well, this is already counting, so by the time you use it, if you use it 2 minutes later in another fight, once your ult is up, then it's you're already halfway to getting another summoner. So sometimes you can get 3 in a row really quickly. If you use this one, then you're chasing somebody down, you get your 5 seconds out of combat, you use it again when it goes back to your normal one, and then you can swap and get another one to use it again. So you can actually get like 3 summoners in pretty quick succession if you just dip in and out of combat every now and then. So I think that's really good, and eventually, usually you don't get down to that 120 seconds. You're just not going to have enough useful summoners. But you can certainly get this down to like 160 seconds, which is really nice. 160 seconds on something like an Exhaust or a heal or whatever feels really powerful. And then the rest of this tree is pretty nice too. So, you know, you can get perfect timing, which is great early on as Rakan. It helps you out if you want to dive at level 6. You know, or if you just want to go into kind of a really dangerous situation and just use the stopwatch to get out of it. I think that's really helpful. You can go magical footwear on him, but he really likes to get his tier 2 boots pretty quickly. So, that's an option, though. I mean, the tier 2 boots are definitely an option if you want to go, like, brown boots into Glacial Shroud, then upgrade your gold item. Then you'll probably hit 9 minutes before you need to get your tier 2 boot, so that could actually be pretty helpful in a lot of situations. Biscuit Delivery is really nice. It helps you get through kind of tougher laning phases. That's going to be good too because he's going to have less armor and HP. And then Cosmic Insight is great as well because it's going to lower your item active cooldown for when you get Locket Redemption later on. It's going to give you the 5% CDR, which is excellent. And then it's going to give you 5% cooldown in your summoners, which is solid as well. So overall, I think this is a really balanced, strong tree. I think this is going to come back with a lot of supports on this patch, especially after the nerfs to some of the runes, which we'll talk about here in a second. But if you go Inspiration and then you go into Resolve as your secondary, you actually gain 20 more HP base. So I'm not going to switch over to it, but basically you go 15 to some other number early on, like 15 to 135 if you go... if you go, like, Resolve, or if you go, like, Guardian into something else, like Guardian into Sorcery. So if you go, like, Guardian, Bone Plating, Chrysalis, Revitalize, and then something like Nimbus Cloak and Celerity, which I think is a pretty common build, then you'll actually start with 15 less HP. So if you go with this, or 20 less HP, if you go with this, then you're actually gaining 20 HP in the early game. So that kind of compensates for losing 30, so you're losing 10. And then it scales later on to give you a lot more HP. Now you are losing AP. I think you're losing like 8 AP early, but honestly, it doesn't matter that much early. Like, you're not going to be spamming your Q and hitting people all the time. Like, it's on a pretty long cooldown. It doesn't have a lot of base damage. So, in other words, I think this will be okay. I think Rakan will still be strong. It is getting a nerf to his HP early, which is a thing. But you also have to keep in mind that they are nerfing Airy and they're nerfing Scorch. And so you're not going to get harassed nearly as much, right? So every time that Fiddlesticks hits you with his E and your Rakan, you know, before you'd be taking 20 damage from Scorch and 15 from Airy, that's 35. Well, now you're only going to be taking 10 from Airy and 10 from Scorch, so it's only going to be 20 now. So you're saving 15 damage right there. So that makes up just about for this base health difference. So I think Rakan will still be really good, especially because a lot of the poke champions aren't going to be as good early on. So I think Rakan will still be very strong. We'll see. Okay, Rammus getting some very light changes. It's not going to change his position that much. I just think there's too much counterplay to him right now. So he's okay, but I feel like there are better tanks out there. He's kind of like Hecarim. He's a really old school champ. That just doesn't have enough scaling, I think, as the game goes on. So he's interesting. I wish they would play around with his ult a little bit more. They nerfed the cooldown on his ult a long time ago, but I thought that was a really cool aspect of his kit, where he can take towers really quickly with the ult. I thought that was an interesting, like, unique niche that he had. But people were abusing it, like going top lane Rammus, with like teleport and just like pushing the wave constantly. And I don't know. I didn't think he was even that much of a menace as top lane Rammus, but I guess enough people did where they thought he was a menace to where they nerfed him. So, anyways, I don't think this is going to bring him back. He's okay. I mean, can you win with him? Sure. But I feel like a lot of times there are going to be better options. Okay, Sion, doesn't matter. This guy just has so many problems. They nerfed his E poke with Comet. Like, they just gutted the damage on E pretty much. And that was his whole thing, was he just, like, auto-pushed the wave with his E and his Q. Did pretty good poke damage, never ran out of mana, and just got a Banner of Command first item and just put, like, infinite pressure on the top lane without using very many resources. But now he just doesn't have that. It just does not wave clear the same way that it did. Doesn't poke as well. Banner of Command's no longer an item. So he just doesn't have the power to keep up with other potential tanks in the top lane. So I think you're just better off, like in this meta, just going something like Mundo or Cho or something like that, and you'll just be a lot more effective. Okay, Tahm Kench is a pretty big change. So the problem with Tahm Kench in pro play, he gets picked all the time, and he's just really anti-engage, anti-fun. Now, I have played a lot of Tahm Kench. He was my most played champion in Season 6, so I really like the Kench. I respect him. He's a very unique and interesting champ. He's a great Southern gentleman. But he's really frustrating to play against. And he forces teams, like, he stops a lot of aggression. He forces farm-offs. You can't engage on this guy. Like, he's almost single-handedly the reason that Thresh is not played in pro play anymore. It's because of Tahm Kench. And Thresh is a really fun champion. People love seeing Thresh. So I think that nerfing this is a good idea. He's still going to be intact, but like basically what they're doing is they're saying if you eat an ally, it's going to have a huge cooldown. So basically you're only going to be able to eat an ally once per fight. So it goes to a 28-second cooldown to start. Now usually you'll want to get 3 points of Tongue Lash in lane and then switch over to max your W. So you have your W max by level 10. But still, it'll still be an extra 6-second cooldown. So that's a pretty big deal. Because right now, like, if you get a decent chunk of CDR, it's hard to get CDR on him. Because you can't go Ionian boots, you have to go a defensive boot. And tank itemization doesn't let you get as much CDR because you have to go all the way up to tier 3 on the Relic line, the Targon line, in order to get the CDR, which means you have to spend a lot of extra gold on that you could be spending on other items that have CDR. And then typically you'll buy Locket as well, which also doesn't have CDR. So it's not uncommon for a lot of tanks to kind of cap out around 20% or so CDR in games. Probably less than that. And so that's a major disadvantage they have over enchanters who get CDR at level, at their tier 2 gold item. They can usually get Ionian boots for additional CDR, and then all of their items are going to have 10% CDR as well. So, anyways, what I'm trying to say is that this extra cooldown timing is going to stick. It's not going to get reduced as much as it would if he were an enchanter. So this is very meaningful. It means he's only going to get off one of these in most fights, and so he has to be very careful and particular about who he's going to eat. Now, if you eat an enemy, then it's actually a lower cooldown by a little bit. Yeah, so if you eat an enemy, then it goes to 8 seconds, whereas it would have been 10 seconds. So you save 2 seconds on that. But a lot of times, especially in pro play, you're not eating enemies. Like, you're playing Tahm Kench pretty much for 2 reasons in pro play. One is to remove crowd control pretty much when someone like Ash Arrow is your AD carry, you just get him out with Tahm Kench. And then number 2 is his ultimate, so that you can rotate around the map quickly and make plays, because it's on a really low cooldown. Like, it's 120 seconds, and it's basically like a TF ult for 2. So, very strong. So the second part's intact. He's still going to have really good rotations, really good map control with his ultimate. And that gets a lot better with highly coordinated teams. It's hard to set up in solo queue. So you can spam ping your jungler and say, hey, free double kills bot lane all day, and just like ping your ult. And a lot of times they still just won't come down there. Like, they just don't get it. But in pro play, it matters a lot. So anyways, I think this is going to hurt him. I think he will still probably get played into specific matchups. I just don't know if you'll want to blind pick him. It depends on how powerful something like Janna becomes in pro play, if the meta shifts that way after the nerfs to Electrocute. But a lot of pro players don't use Electrocute. We'll talk about Electrocute here in a second. But anyways, so good nerf, deserved nerf. He's pick banned like every game in pro play, and he has been for months. I think he's pretty toxic overall, just because he just forces farm off bot lane. Like, he just won't let you fight a lot of times. So it's okay. I don't think it's gonna matter as much for solo queue. It's interesting. It might, like, it'll help probably top lane Tahm Kench and jungle Tahm Kench, because the mana cost is a lot lower, so you can do it repeatedly in the jungle without running out of mana. And then you are going to get that slight reduction in cooldown if you eat enemies. So that could be interesting. Now you do get a lower cooldown on your Q, but the slow duration is also lowered, so it's going to be harder to catch up to people. But you can use this more often. So lower cooldown Q with a lower cooldown W could mean that you can like permanently lock somebody up top lane, especially if you have Glacial Augment. So I don't know, we might see Tahm Kench top with Glacial Augment just be like a really oppressive like anti-melee lane, just like Tryndamere's worst nightmare or something like that. Because if Tryndamere ults, and Tryndamere is pretty popular, if he ults or something and you eat him, then you're basically canceling out most of his ult. So I think that's interesting. You can't hold them in your mouth for as long, though. So that's kind of how they're trying to compensate for this. So you can't hold them in your mouth for 3 seconds. You can only hold them for 2 seconds. Then you have to spit them out. So it's interesting changes. I think overall buff to top lane Tahm Kench. Probably a pretty decent buff, although I don't think he's super viable right now. He's just so susceptible to ganks. But he is very oppressive if he gets left alone. So buff to that, buff to jungle Tahm Kench, nerf to support Tahm Kench. Overall, pretty good changes, I think, for the game. Alright, Talia's base move speed lowered, cooldown on this is increased. You don't max Seismic Shove, I don't think, until second. So this will matter, from levels like 1 to 9 pretty significantly, and then from levels like 9 to 13 a little bit less so. In late game it won't matter. So it's just kind of hurting her early to mid game. Now this is mostly for catching people too. Now they didn't nerf the damage. It just gives you less opportunities to catch people. So if you miss your W in lane, it's a lot more punishing. Base movement speed lowered. I still think she'll be really strong. They are lower, or they're taking away the vision on her ult, which is also useful. But overall, I still think she'll be good. Great rotations, like pretty good wave clear, really high burst damage, especially on single targets. She'll be okay, but this will bring her down just a little bit. I think overall she's not super far out of line. 52, 53%. People just aren't picking her as much anymore middle, but I still think she's good. That's probably an okay nerf. Okay, Trundle, this is a pretty massive nerf, I think, to Trundle. Now, this AD ratio, I believe this is actually a full AD. Yeah, now his Q is percentage of AD plus 20% AD. Trundle's next basic attack deals bonus physical damage and slows the target. Trundle gains bonus attack damage for 8 seconds. So it's lowering to 5 seconds. That's probably fine. It's got a 4-second cooldown, so you can just reapply this over and over again. So that's not that big of a deal. Plus 20. Is that right? AD ratio increased from 100 to 120 to 100 to 140. Okay, so this number is going from 20% plus 20%. Okay, so it's always 100. It always deals his basic attack damage. Then it does this much plus a certain amount. So it's going to plus 20% AD to plus 40%. So what that means is, now this does account for base AD. So his base AD at, let's say, like level 9 is going to be 88.2. Now you're getting an extra 20%. You're losing 40 damage on your Q, right? Base damage on your Q. It's going from 100 to 60. It doesn't matter in the early game that much. But it scales all the way up to 140%. So that means that you need to find some way to get an extra 40 AD out of this. Is 20%, which means you need 200 AD. So at 200 AD is your break-even point. So you get 88 at this level, so that means you need 112 AD from your runes, items, other sort of stat boosts in order to get this. So you probably need like a full Hydra plus, a little bit more AD to make this work. So overall, it's a nerf. Like, you have to build AD Trundle if you want to get it. Now, you do actually steal some AD off of this, though. So you'll steal 40. So that takes your effective AD up to 128. And if you have a Hydra, I think that's 80. So that's 200 right there. So I guess if you complete a Hydra, and with the AD that you steal off of this, and the base AD that you have in your runes and everything, pretty much when you have one big complete offensive item, it's the same damage. And then if you get more offensive items after that, it's actually an increase in your overall damage. So that's interesting. I mean, it's a pretty big nerf. But if you don't get any AD, if you do get AD, it'll be a buff on Trundle. I think a lot of people just get like Tiamat and then I think just like Cinder Hulk and just go off. I guess you could get Warrior. Warrior has 80, I think. 60. Tiamat has 25. That's interesting, actually, because 25 plus this, that's 85, plus his base is 88. That's 173, plus the 40 that you steal off of your Q. That's 113, or that's 213 total. That's actually a buff at level 9. So I guess early on, maybe it's... But by the time you get to level 9, you're probably going to have Warrior Tiamat. If that goes through to 20%. That seems really bizarre. Like, it doesn't actually seem like that's a nerf. Like, that's actually a buff. Because this AD from 8 to 5 doesn't matter because your chomp's on a 4-second cooldown, so you can just reapply that every time. So if you just chomp somebody and you have Warrior plus Tiamat, you're actually gaining damage off of this at level 9. And it doesn't affect early levels, really. Not that I could tell. I don't know. I guess this is their attempt at a nerf, but I think it's actually a slight buff. If you end up getting, like, completing and going for the full Ravenous Hydra, then it's definitely going to be a buff later on. That kind of forces you to go Warrior, though. Like, if you go Cinder Hulk... So, basically, if you go Cinder Hulk, it's a nerf. Because you're going to lose that 60 AD, and it's going to be a nerf at level 9. But if you go Warrior, it's a marginal buff. So, I guess they're trying to get you to go Warrior if you want to fight. Or if you want that damage. Most people look like they're going Cinder Hulk. Some people go Warrior. So, on the Cinder Hulk build, it's a nerf. But it's a buff on the Warrior build. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. So, if you build damage, you're going to get even more damage out of it in terms of scaling. But if you build Cinder Hulk, then you're going to lose damage. It's okay. I don't think Trundle's that far out of line for solo queue. I think in pro play, he's seen a lot, specifically as a counter to Sejuani, because whenever she gets those improved stats off of her passive, if he steals those stats, and then once she loses her passive, because it snapshots, like if she gets the extra 100 armor and he steals 30% of that, then he's stealing 30 armor from her, and then whenever she loses those stats, she still gets that negative 30 armor, because it snapshots right when he presses it. So that's why he's used specifically as a counter pick to Sejuani. But anyway, so I think it's a good idea. It's mostly for pro play, I think. He's probably like a 50%. He's 52, so I think he'll still be strong. But yeah, it's definitely a nerf to Cinder Hulk, the Cinder Hulk build. Okay, Tryndamere, this is specifically for AP Tryndamere. I don't think it's that much of a problem in solo queue. I mean, I know there are people on the channel that think this is like super OP or something, but I've seen it in several games. It's like every now and then it's problematic, but he's got like 51% win rate. I don't know. That's fine. I guess there's a lot of uproar in the community about AP Tryndamere, but they are nerfing his slash time, if that's what you max first, by 2 seconds. That's going to nerf his mobility, and that's going to nerf his ability to do, you know, his burst damage off of AP Tryndamere build. So that's okay. That's fine. Wukong, I'm glad they're nerfing this champion. This champion's very frustrating to play against. Now, he's not seen a lot. He's hardly ever seen in pro play. And you don't see him a ton, but he almost always has like a 55% win rate. It's really high. And more people are starting to play him now. And his ban rate is definitely going up a bit too. Like, the problem with Wukong is that he does extremely high single target burst, and he does really high team fight burst damage, and he's invisible. And that's just too much. Like, you can't make a champion that can crowd control an entire team, just completely delete multiple targets potentially, and is invisible with a really low cooldown on an ult, and gets free, like, tankiness. Like, if he goes into a team fight, he gets, like, a free, you know, whatever the number is, like 40 armor, 40 magic resist. Like, it's just insane. And he has utility to, like, potentially help shred tanks. Like, he's not amazing against tanks, but his Q does crush the armor on the target. So he kind of reminds me of like Jarvan before Jarvan got nerfed several times, in that it was actually a very similar case where the Q was overloaded, it shredded armor and did other good stuff and had pretty strong damage. And he had a low cooldown, high impact ult that could blow up single targets, or had really good team fight utility. So in many ways he was a lot like Jarvan, and why Jarvan was a balance problem last season. So yeah, I mean, the numbers are just too big. He's got total AD, not bonus AD, which is very problematic. I talked about that just a second ago, I think, with like Trundle and the scaling. But like, this number here is ridiculous, because this includes your base stat. So it's 800 and 440% of your total AD, including like the 90 AD you're gonna get baseline on your just for leveling up. So this ends up being like 2,000 damage off of like 2 items or something. It's just absolutely absurd. So like, once he gets Ghostblade plus Dustblade, is too much. Now, yes, nerfing Electrocute, nerfing Sudden Impact, that is going to hurt him a little bit, but he's pretty far over the line. Like, his laning phase is bad, but even if he gets like crushed in the laning phase, all he has to do is just get that Dustblade or Ghostblade, and then later on just roam around and get a few kills, and he's just very, very difficult to deal with. Like, if his flash is up and he rolls in invisible and then just flash Qs, you know, onto your backline and ults, they're dead, pretty much. And there's very little you can do to peel that, because he's going to knock you up as well. So you can't even, like, jump to him with Braum to try to do anything, or, like, jump to him with Rakan to shield him or whatever. You could try to blow him back with Janna if you can, but he's probably already going to have him dead. So he's just a really problematic champion, so I'm glad that they're nerfing him. Not too much. I mean, I think he's an interesting champ. He never really has had his time in the sun in a meta, so I don't like to nerf him completely out of the meta, but I think nerfing this a little bit is probably fine. Okay, and then Zoe, get that champion out of here. Everybody's so tired of this champion. Like, I was on the fence for a while. Like, this champion's okay. She's not that bad, you know. I was trying to be a Zoe defender for a while, but after playing against some good Zoes several times, this champion is just so frustrating. And the worst part about her kit is like not the one shot from the Qs. It's like I get that, you know, a lot of burst champions or assassins have some kind of one shot mechanic. You know, Vhagar hits you with a cage, you're dead, that type of thing. If you don't have a Quicksilver Sash. But with Zoe, it's like all of her abilities can kill you just about. Like just one long range Q that you can't see coming sometimes if she just like pops over a wall on you, that can kill you. It's on a really low cooldown. Her bubble, if she bubbles you and somebody doesn't block it, you're dead. But then also, so she has 2 different one-shot spells, pretty much. And her W is such a huge problem because there's no cooldown on it. I guess there's like a 0.25 second cooldown on it. It does basically guaranteed damage to whoever she auto-attacks. It gives her a huge amount of bonus movement speed. It lets her steal a summoner, which is huge, to use extra summoner spells. And that triggers her passive whenever you do it. So she just gets too much free damage off of her W and her passive combination in conjunction with getting extra movement speed and getting the actual summoner spell. So I think they should just like remove the movement speed on it. Just make her like more vulnerable, easier to catch. Personally, I would just remove the movement speed. But they are lowering the damage quite a bit. So on her passive, it's going from 32.5 to 20%. That's a pretty big difference. And then the base damage is getting lowered a little bit. Not as important, but nice. And then the Spell Thief going from 55% to 40% is pretty good. So now, you know, she's going to be hitting for 27.5% less of your AP. So if she has 200 AP, you know, she's going to be dealing like 55 less damage. So I think that's probably a decent way to go. So now she's just kind of becoming more like an annoying, just going to deal a little bit of, you know, incremental damage over time in fights if she abuses the W instead of just, you know, potentially one-shotting people with it. So I think that's a decent direction with her. I think she's still going to be pretty good. Probably we'll see if this is enough. I mean, they did nerf the base damage on... I think they nerfed her W before. I don't remember what it was, but it was like last patch or the patch before that. They nerfed some aspect of her kit even more. So we'll see how it goes. I still think she'll probably be pretty good, but this definitely does take away some of her guaranteed damage, which is nice. Okay. Summoner heal, they're lowering the cooldown from 270 to 240. I think overall this is good. This is going to help against burst champions. Ignite is really, really strong right now, and Ignite does counter heal. So I think this is going to offer a more attractive alternative to try to keep bot laners from taking teleport or from taking barrier. And it might even get like some mid laners to take heal a little bit more. So I think it's good. There's counterplay to it. You know, if Ignite's on you, it's already going to be cut in half. So you're already heavily incentivized to try to use this early. It still has a pretty respectable cooldown of 240, so I think it's good. Okay, couple other changes here. Now this is going to be the big one on this patch, is the Electrocute nerf. So, and this is what I've been calling for like 4 different patches. If you watch my PBE patch preview, I've been saying this should be one of their #1 priorities because Electrocute scales too well. I know that there had been a couple people on the chat that or actually one guy in particular, in some of the comments, it was like, well, it's basically just Thunderlords or whatever. It's not. It is way better than Thunderlords ever was. And the reason for that is this AP ratio was huge. Like, the Thunderlords AP ratio was like a 0.2, I think, most of the time. So it was way lower on the AD ratio. And the other aspect of this is adaptive damage. So that's really important to understand because of the way that lethality interacts with this. If it's a physical damage champion, lethality is going to apply to this and make it deal even more damage. Or if you have any other kind of armor shredding in your kit, Wukong, then this is going to deal physical damage, which is very, very important because it gets amplified by lethality. Old school Thunderlords was always magic damage, so it did not get amplified by lethality. So that's a very big caveat to understand. And just the raw number on it is higher. I mean, 50 to 220 was way more than like old school Thunderlord. So if you look at like the old school Thunderlord here, it used to have a 0.3 on it in its final iteration. It did magic damage and it did 10 to 180. So 10 is like laughable in the laning phase. And this was a very, very strong rune for a long time. I mean, this rune had, or this mastery had to be nerfed a couple of different times. But yeah, it was every like 25 seconds in the laning phase and a 0.3, and then it dealt 10 to 180 versus, you know, this one does 50 at level 1, 5 times as much if you trigger it very early on, all the way up to 220, which is, of course, much higher. And then it had the 50% ratio versus the 30%. And then, you know, it was on a longer cooldown early on, 50 to 25. But they're changing it to something that is closer to what old school Thunderlord used to be. So they're doing 30 to 180, which 30 is still 10 times what old Thunderlord was at level 1. And it's got a 40% bonus attack damage ratio and a 25% AP. So still more, still a little on the strong side, but they did nerf especially the top end damage by 40, which is very significant. Then they're lowering the cooldown to 25 to 20. So they're basically turning it into, you want to try to trigger this, kind of like Scorch, you know, you want to trigger it every 20 to 30 seconds, which is basically once per minion wave. A minion wave shows up every 30 seconds, so if you can trigger Electrocute once every minion wave, it's pretty good. And so if you trigger it twice, you know, twice every 50 seconds instead of just once, then it's actually going to end up being more damage. It's going to have a 0.8 ratio in that case, and it's going to have a 60, you know, baseline damage. 60 to 360 baseline damage. So it's actually more damage during the laning phase for champions that can trigger it consistently. So someone like a Zyra, this could potentially be pretty good. I still think that you would most likely want to go for things like Comet, but I don't know. I'd have to do the math and think about this for Zyra. Like, it might be possible to do something like Taste of Blood to help you sustain in lane and then get Electrocute just because you can proc it so easily. With someone like Zyra or, I mean, you wouldn't do this on like Nami or Sona probably, but they could proc it easily. I don't think you would get this on them. But for like the Talon all in when he's level 6 and has like his Dustblade and he's rolling up with Electrocute, it's going to do a lot less damage, like upfront burst damage. So this is turning it more into a laning tool that has like okay burst damage later, but not like insane, you know, one-shot potential with things like Dustblade and lethality scaling and things like that. So overall, I think this is very healthy for the game. It's a very reasonable compromise, I think, where it's saying, look, we're not going to completely gut Electrocute users. We're just going to say, you need to trigger this. We're going to give you more power in lane if you can trigger this more frequently, but we're taking away from the all-in one-shot assassins that have very little counterplay to this. Talon, Zed, Quinn, Fizz, stuff like that. So I really like the direction they're taking with that. I think that's reasonable. They didn't completely gut it. They just said that you have to use it in a more consistent way. And so the damage is slower. It's dealt over time. There's more counterplay to it. So I like that. Cheap Shot is also getting lowered. And this is a little weird to me because I feel like a lot of champions don't really use Cheap Shot that well. I mean, maybe the ones that do use it really abuse it. But, you know, having that true damage lowered from 15 to 8 early on is a big deal. But I just don't think a lot of champs use this. So there might be a couple of corner cases, but this shouldn't affect that much in the meta. What is their context on this anyways? I never clicked on the context here. They talk about that one. Oops, that's too far down. Okay, whatever. It's not going to matter that much. Okay. Sudden impact, so this will matter. So this is once again going to affect champions that have a dash, which it's most assassins. So they're going to be losing 3 lethality or 2 spell pen. So I don't think this is going to completely like destroy those champions, but it's going to be meaningful. It's once again trying to take away a little bit of the all-in potential of Zed, of Talon, Fizz, stuff like that. So, you know, this in conjunction with the Electrocute nerf is going to be, you know, a pretty decent little chunk. It's not going to make them unviable, but it will add a bit more counterplay to them. So I think overall, good change. Sudden impact definitely gets abused by champions that use it too well. This one was a little more surprising. So they are nerfing Airy, and I think the reason they're doing this is, once again, to try to bring down Sona and Nami in lane, primarily. Champions that can poke very consistently, that also can use this back half of Airy for the shield later on. Because Sona and Nami are a little out of control just in terms of win rates in solo queue. I mean, Nami's in like every game, pretty much. That's what it feels like to me. Even though her pick rate doesn't seem to be that high, it literally feels like she's in every game. And she has like a 54% win rate, and that really shouldn't be happening for a champion that's picked that often. Like, if a champion is picked more than 15% and they have over a 53% win rate, like, there's something wrong with that champion. Because that's not just one tricks playing it. That's autofill people playing it too. You know, if you're going much beyond 10%, that just means that when people get filled, they're playing the champ, and they shouldn't play as well on the champ. So she's just too consistent. She lays down too much, like, harass early on, which also doubles as a heal, and she scales pretty well later on into the game. So I think that's part of the problem. And then Sona is getting very close as well. She's close to 54%. So these two are really, really good Airy users. Soraka's also pretty good, and she's at about 52%. So I think they're trying to dial that back. They're trying to say, okay, we're nerfing Electrocute, we're nerfing Sudden Impact. We just want to make sure the enchanters don't take off. So we're going to buff Leona a little bit. We're going to nerf Airy a little bit. So I think that's fair. Incidentally, this does also nerf Fiddlesticks, who is a very problematic champion. If you go Airy on Fiddlesticks, not a ton of people do Airy on Fiddle. Like, he does have an Aftershock build, which is okay. But I think that the Aftershock build on Fiddle is less toxic because it doesn't put up as much free harass over and over and over again. That has very little counterplay to it. Fiddle's a very toxic support. I've been playing him a lot. He's very strong right now, but his playstyle is really toxic. There's not a lot of counterplay to it, so I wouldn't be that upset if they nerfed him out of the meta. I don't know if this is enough to nerf him out of the meta, but it certainly hurts his Airy build, which I think is his best build in solo queue, especially under Diamond. But he does have the Aftershock, which is better for all ends, particularly at higher elos where you have a lot more coordination. So it does. So it nerfs Nami, it nerfs Sona, and it nerfs Fiddle, who are like all three pretty problematic champions right now. It buffs Rakan. Now, a lot of challenger Rakan players will take Airy, but I think it's a really bad choice in solo queue. I've talked about that a lot. You can't consistently trigger Airy enough as Rakan, especially if you're not getting ample backup from your AD carry. If they're not harassing with you, if they're not making really good trades with you, then it's difficult to get those Airy procs in. So I think overall the nerf to Airy is a buff to Rakan. But so they're taking off 15 damage from it. That's okay. That's a pretty significant nerf early on. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot. It's just 5 damage. But on these types of champions like Nami, like, that's 5 damage every 10 seconds. So every, like, whenever you hit them with a wave, pretty much. So, you know, that could be 4 or 5 times, you know, per laning phase. That's a lot. That's like 20 damage per minute. You know, and in a 5-minute, you know, the first 5 minutes of a laning phase, that's 100 damage that you could have dealt off of just Airy. So I think that is pretty significant. Now, they did buff the shield a little bit by 5, but you're not using the heal and the shield early on. They didn't buff it later. It's still just a flat 80. So it's not going to matter. Now, the dangerous thing here, though, is this potentially could be a buff for Janna. Janna does not use Airy very well in lane. She'll get Airy a lot of times. I'll have to think about it, you know. I'm going to reflect. She could be a good spellbook user, potentially, because she really, frankly, doesn't use Airy that well. Especially after some of these nerfs. That might be a little extreme, because Airy is good later on with her because of her shield. She'll probably still use Airy in the long run, but she's much, much better, like, saying, hey, look, Airy's not as good, because now Nami and Sona aren't going to beat her down as much early on, so this is definitely a buff to Janna. I think. All of these. Everything here is a buff to Janna. Um, so, I think that, interesting choice. I like it. They're trying to keep the enchanters in line except for Janna. But Janna's creeping back up there. She's getting closer to, even before these changes, she's getting closer to 51%. She's getting better as the crit marksmen are getting better specifically. Okay, Celerity. This is a nerf to very specific champions that have a lot of increased movement speed, especially Nimbus Cloak users. So if you Nimbus Cloak right now, you get an extra 16 AP while Nimbus Cloak is active. And that's pretty good. Like, that's pretty meaningful. Especially if you have some kind of like flash or dash or just something else that increases your movement. It's good. Now, I don't think it's that far out of line right now because it's very limited windows of power. But there are certain champions that can abuse this way more than others if they want to. If they take Celerity, like Rakan potentially, or Quinn. She gets a lot of movement speed. Any of the Predator users, Olaf, stuff like that. So I think there are some abuse cases, but I don't really necessarily agree with this. But it will hurt those champions that do have burst movement speed that want to do something in the sorcery tree, particularly Nimbus Cloak users. So that's a nerf there. And then Scorch, they're nerfing it from... they're basically giving it the electrocute treatment, where it's pretty much the same damage, but you have to trigger it every 10 seconds to get the maximum amount out of it. So that means that it's going to be a lot less efficient, because you're not going to be able to hit with most champions. You're not going to be able to hit somebody with an ability every 10 seconds as consistently as you could hit them every 20 seconds, right? Because there might just be like just less opportunities to do that. Like maybe you have to wait on the next wave to show up. Maybe the jungler is stopping by and they're going to camp you for an extra, 10 seconds or something. It adds up over time, so you're going to lose a lot less efficiency over time with this. And that's going to allow like things like Second Wind, Doran Shield, stuff like that to help mitigate some of those hits. Okay, but overall, so you'll notice like sorcery got whacked here. I mean, this is 3 different things out of sorcery in different trees. These are all the most common things. Like Aerie, Celerity, Scorch is standard on a ton of different supports. And so I think that definitely opens up more space for champs to go Inspiration more often, to go Summoner Spellbook more often. Maybe to try to go into Resolve a little bit more. I mean, we could be seeing like some Guardian Revitalized Janna again, potentially. Or Summoner Spellbook Janna. I haven't done the math on that yet. But, having things like Exhaust, Heal, Barrier, Teleport, Cleanse, like all of these could be pretty useful in different situations as someone like Janna. So, I don't know. We'll have to check it out and see. But overall, I think this is a good move in the right direction. It's taking away some of the assassins. It's hurting some of the sorcery users, which frankly are some of the most oppressive champs in the laning phase. So I think it's pretty good. I think as far as supports go, the big winner is going to be Janna, and I think that Rakan is also going to be pretty strong after this, although Rakan is kind of getting balanced out a little bit with his nerf. Some of the champions that will probably fall a little bit would be like Fiddlesticks. He doesn't care about Celerity as much, but Scorch plus Aerie matters. The Aerie definitely matters. The Scorch is like, you can hit people almost every 10 seconds with Rakan, or with Fiddle, but once again, like, sometimes you have to wait. Like, you don't want to steal the CS of your ally AD carry, so you're not able to throw the crow every 10 seconds. You have to wait on a wave. Usually you can only throw 1, maybe 2 crows per wave without risking taking CS. So it's definitely going to be a hit to his harassment early on. But to be honest, like, he still can push, though. He can still put out some harass. I still think he'll probably be pretty good. But he'll definitely fall down a little bit. So yeah, I think it's a great patch. If all of this stuff goes through, I think nerfing most of these runes is good. It's going to open up diversity a little bit in the bottom lane. I think that enchanters are definitely going to make a comeback, but this does amp them down a little bit, the Aerie and the Scorch nerfs. So we could see more Gathering Storm, we could see more Spellbook, we could see more Guardian. We'll definitely be seeing a bit more Janna, whether you like or hate that. I still think they did a nice balancing, as I said before. They aren't completely destroying assassins, but they are taking down some of their all-in potential and in exchange giving them back a little bit of laning presence. Electrocute could actually become something interesting on Zyra, especially after the nerf to Scorch. I mean, I guess you could go Scorch. You could go Electrocute and Scorch. So we'll see. That might open up some new builds, because Zyra can proc this every 25 seconds, like, for sure. And so maybe that's worth. I don't know. I'll have to see. And then I like that Zoe and Wukong got nerfed, like, not completely out of the meta, but a nice little smack in the face there. AP Trendamere, I don't think it matters, but a lot of people are up in arms. Like, that's a pretty decent change. Trundle, good for pro play. Talia, good for pro play, still viable. Tahm Kench, good for pro play, still viable. I think this is great. They hit so many high problem champions for pro play and for solo queue, and they hit them in ways that just feel balanced and fair, I think, for the most part. And they buffed a couple of obscure champions. I don't think it's going to matter with like Hecarim and Rammus, but at least they're trying, and Amumu. They're trying to bring back some of the underrepresented tanks a little bit. Nerfed Fizz. So, overall, awesome patch. I think this is one of the best, like, balance patches that we've had in a while, in terms of, I think they've done a really good job of lowering power without too many feels bad and without moving stuff completely out of the meta. So, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. As I said, I'm not going to be streaming Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'll probably be back Friday night to stream this week, so stay tuned for that. And if anything changes significantly on the patch notes, just look into the comments of this video, and I will leave a brief little note about the change and how it affects what I said in the video. In the future, I'll see, in the next couple of weeks, I'll see if I can figure out some, like, software solutions where I can do the patch notes on the road, maybe through my iPad or through, like, a school computer or something like that. It's just, we'll just have to see. I don't want to spend an extra $500 to $1,000 to get a laptop. I never used laptops for the last 5 or 6 years. I never used it. It's like all the computers in the classrooms at my old university, they all had built-in computers. So, in the teacher station, so I didn't have to, like, bring anything to school with me. And I lived close, relatively close. I had to drive 45 minutes out to campus, but I lived relatively close, and so I didn't have to worry about long-term computer usage. But anyways, these are technical things I'll be working on, so hopefully you'll bear with me on that. I really appreciate it. And yeah, just let me know what you think about this patch in the comments. Stay tuned. I should have a tier list. I may not get the support tier list done before I leave. I might try to see if I can do that. But if I don't, I'll have it when I get back, and then I'll definitely do the 80 carry and mid-tier list when I get back over the weekend, this coming Saturday and Sunday. So thank you very much once again. I really appreciate it, and I'll see everybody next time. Have a good day.